Okay, we will go ahead and get started. I think Mr. Watts was able to log back in. Mr. Watts, are you able to access your video? You don't have to turn it on at the moment, but just want to make sure you can access it.
I can access it. Thank you, Commissioner.
All righty. If everyone is ready, we will get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Anthony Thomas Davis, Commissioner for Single Member District 1A06 and Chair of ANC 1A's Special Committee on Public Life. Today is Thursday, September 5th, 2024, and we're convening in person at the Columbia Heights Community Center in room 418 and virtually over the Zoom platform. The time is now 2:14 p.m. and I'm calling to order this public hearing of the Special Committee on Public Life. I would like to acknowledge that one of our committee members of the special committee is here, community member John Henderson, who resides in Single Member District 1A04. Today, we are meeting to discuss the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza, a cornerstone of our community that symbolizes the rich history, vibrant culture, and collective aspirations of Columbia Heights. This plaza is not just a physical space, it's a reflection of the neighborhood's identity, a place where people come, and more importantly, maybe don't currently come, together to celebrate memorable moments and milestones, whether personal or communal, engage with neighbors for conversation or a community event, and to enjoy what the space has to offer generally, whether to people watch, enjoy a meal from a nearby restaurant, or to simply relax and enjoy the urban surroundings. Yet, despite its potential, the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza faces numerous issues that hinder it from fully realizing the vision it was given over 2 decades ago in the 2004 Public Realm Framework and the 1997 Columbia Heights Community-Based Plan. And as we undertake another full examination of public life in Columbia Heights with the current public life study led by the DC Office of Planning, we would do ourselves a huge disservice to the community to not fully examine the roadblocks that have prevented this vital public space from thriving over the preceding years and assess a strategy for how to help it succeed in the future based on the findings and recommendations of the study. I want to note for the record that I previously met in August with the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, Wayne Turnage, the Department of Behavioral Health Director, Dr. Barbara Bazran, Department of Small and Local Business Development Director Rosemary Shug Evans, and Deputy Mayor for Education Paul Kine, who oversees Parks and Recreations in the education cluster. At that meeting, we discussed a host of interconnected and relevant problems and issues at the Civic Plaza, like mental and behavioral health issues, and the urgency of reallocating existing and surging new funding and resources to address the acute needs we are seeing while streamlining service delivery through our network of community-based organizations. To anchor our discussion today, I want to quote Dan Reed, a Greater Washington Regional Policy Director who in 2012, then only a GG Wash contributor, in responding to Washington Post architecture critic Philip Kennicott's concern about the lack of great public space and squares in DC at the time, said the new plaza at the 14th Street and Park Road in Columbia Heights has everything he talks about. There's a fountain in the middle for cooling off, tables and chairs for leisurely outdoor dining, and buildings on all 4 sides that make the space into a, quote, outdoor room, unquote. It's a new space and a promising one. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes one of DC's great urban squares in the future. With that in mind, I would like to acknowledge the witnesses before the committee today, government witnesses from the Department of Parks and Recreations, Mr. Cesar Enriquez and Mr. Michael Watts. I apologize, I did not capture your titles, so excuse me, but I will get those for the record. From the DC Office of Planning, or OP, Valicia Wilson, Associate Director of Urban Design, and Leon, Senior Urban Designer and Project Manager of the Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant Public Life Study. From the Department of General Services, or DGS, Mr. John Stokes, Associate Director of External Affairs, and Mr. Sean Link, Facilities Operations Manager. And finally, the Department of Public Works, or DPW. I'll let the witness introduce himself. I did not catch your name at the outset.
Yes, my name is Eddie Sanders III.
For those that did not hear that, Mr. Eddie Sanders III. With that, I'll turn to our public witnesses for any opening statements or general remarks that they want to make, and then we'll proceed to questions. I will note that I might be joined by colleagues or other committee members in person or virtually. So at some point, I will likely pause to recognize them for a brief statement and any rounds of questions they may have. So we will start with the Department of Parks and Recreations.
Hello, how are you doing today, Commissioner and members of the community? My name is Michael Watts. I am the Chief of Community Rec here at the DC Parks and Rec, and I bring greetings on behalf of my director, Deanie Freeman. This convened a public hearing to address ongoing concerns about the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. The Civic Plaza is one of the most popular amenities in the DPR portfolio, and we welcome any suggestions for improvement. Here's a summary of some of the activities DPR has participated in to support the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. The DC Park Recs is responsible for issuing all permits and programming for the site. In addition to the weekly farmers market, DPR issues permits for 15 events in the site in fiscal year 24, including Columbia Heights Day, a live nativity scene, and a bike to work day kickoff. And for those who may be interested in permitting for the place, you can visit dpr.dc.gov permits for the complete information about getting a permit for the site. DPR operates a very popular spray park on the site during the summer months. We're pleased to report that the mayor has announced that the spray parks will stay open to September 22nd, 2024. And Department of General Services is responsible for all maintenance requests for the site. Residents can submit a request to the mayor's 301 call center. DGS and DPR will be starting a project to provide significant repairs and upgrades to address existing infrastructure and equipment issues for the spray park. The project is scheduled to take place fiscal year 25 and should be complete prior to the start of summer in 2025. District Bridges received a one-time grant in fiscal year 22 to activate parks in Ward 1. They hosted several events in the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. They also convened a working group of stakeholders for the plaza, which included DPR. This group has been inactive. DPR is committed to continuing the engagement process with residents. Again, DPR is committed to working with ANC 1A and all stakeholders to provide quality services for the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. Thank you for your continued partnerships and leadership, and I'm open to answer any questions and dialogue during this time.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. I will now recognize the Office of Planning. Mr. An or Ms. Wilson?
Valicia, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Valicia Wilson here. I am here representing the Office of Planning, and I'm the Associate Director of Urban Design here with my colleague, Lee An, who is managing the public life study for Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant, as well as the vending study. And so we will be answering questions that you have, of course, and then discussing that work and how it ties into the earlier designs of the project in our 2004 plan. And so that will be our main focus today as the planning arm for this space.
Thank you, Ms.
Hi.
Wilson. Mr. An?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioner Davis and the members of ANC 1A Special Committee on Public Life. My name is Lee An. I'm a senior urban designer at the Office of Planning. Also the project manager for the Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant Public Life Studies. This is an ongoing project right now. And I'm here representing Office of Planning to discuss some of the original intended use of the Civic Plaza outlined in OP's 2004 Columbia Heights Public Realm Framework Plan. So as Commissioner Davis stated, the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza is a cornerstone of the community, designed with the purpose of fostering a vibrant and inclusive public space that serves a variety of important functions for both residents and visitors alike. As we reflect on the original vision from the 2004 Columbia Heights Public Realm Framework Plan for this space, I would like to highlight 5 key intended uses that continue to guide our approach to maintaining and enhancing this vital public asset. So first thing is, this plaza was designed to be a community gathering space. So it was conceived as a central location for the community to come together. So it was designed to host gatherings, public events, and celebrations with the capacity to accommodate up to 3,000 people. So this vision underscores the plaza's role as the heart of the Columbia Heights, where the residents can engage in the shared experiences that strengthen community bonds. The second key point, the plaza was envisioned to be a place for cultural expression, cultural and artistic expression, to be specific, including public art installations, performances, and other forms of artistic expression that would reflect the diverse community of the Columbia Heights. And also the plaza was meant to be a canvas for the neighborhood's cultural vibrancy, offering a space for local artists and cultural groups to showcase their work. So the third thing is, the design of the Civic Plaza emphasized strong connection for pedestrians. So it emphasized the connection of the plaza with the surrounding urban environment, including the nearby Metro Plaza. So this was intended to enhance pedestrian access, making the plaza an integral part of the daily lives of the residents and the visitors alike, and ensuring it serves as a seamless link between different parts of the Columbia Heights neighborhood. The fourth intended use is recreation and relaxation. So the plaza was also designed to provide spaces for recreation and relaxation. Features such as the terraced lawn area and sitting area were included to encourage people to linger, relax, and enjoy the dynamic atmospheres of the plaza, whether it's for people watching, casual social interaction, or simply taking a break. So the plaza was designed to offer a welcoming environment for all. And the fifth point is, the plaza was seen as a commercial and social hub. So it should be acting as a catalyst for economic activity, providing a vibrant space that would attract business and visitors. The integration of the plaza with surrounding retail and commercial establishments was a key component of the plan, of the 2004 plan, aiming to create a lively urban atmosphere. This focus on being both a commercial and social hub ensures the plaza contributes to the economic vitality and social fabric of the Columbia Heights. So this 5 intended uses of the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza as envisioned in 2004 continue to guide our efforts today. So we are committed to building upon this foundation, striving to keep this public spaces vibrant, inclusive, and responsive to the needs of the community. So Commissioner Davis, so this was the original intended use from OP's 2004 Columbia Heights Public Realm Framework Plan. So we welcome any other questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. An. Mr. Stokes?
Good afternoon. I am John Stokes, Associate Director, External Affairs with the DC Department of General Services. With me today is Sean Link, DGS's Facilities Operations Manager in the Facilities Management Division. We bring you greetings from our Director, Delano Hunter. DGS builds, maintains, and sustains over 1,000 municipal assets. DG has been pleased to partner with the multiple community-based organizations, government agencies, business owners, community members, and stakeholders involved with the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. It is in our purview to maintain the decorative artistic splash pad, maintain the small tree planters, and repair electrical outlets surrounding the splash pad. To this end, DGS does regular pickup of loose litter at the plaza. In 2022, DGS received pavers from the DC Department of Transportation, DDOT, and DGS replaced those loose and broken bricks with these new bricks. DC Department of Health, DOH, Rodent and Vector Control Division provides rat abatement services to the area. However, as an additional assistance, DGS has installed rodent barrier mesh screening in the planters. DGS also repaired the electrical box and makes routine fixes to the electrical box when it trips. DGS is in discussions with DDOT and the DC Department of Energy and Environment, DOEE, on the next steps for the solar canopies, which have had ongoing issues. And finally, as my counterparts at DPR mentioned, the 14th and Park splash pad requires significant repairs and upgrades to address existing infrastructure and equipment issues. Again, as my colleague mentioned, the mayor has indeed allocated $490,000 currently invested in the splash pad. And again, we are also expecting the work to be completed before summer 2025. DGS has attended multiple meetings regarding the Civic Plaza throughout the years, and we look forward to continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stokes. And finally, we will have Associate Administrator Eddie Saunders for DPW.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Eddie Sanders, Associate Administrator for the Department of Public Works, and I'm here representing the agency and our Director, Timothy Spriggs. As you know, we have, for our litter can collection, we have 167 litter cans that are in Columbia Heights 1A section of the city. We collect them cans 7 days a week. At night. And for street sweeping, we have street sweeping that's happening on Mondays and Tuesdays. With our new bike lane, our bike lanes that's been added to our 1A section of Columbia Heights and 14th Street corridor. We're in the process of putting together a sweeping team to hand sweep all the bike lanes in the section 1A in Columbia Heights area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sanders. I'm gonna dive right in, and I'm gonna start with the Office of Planning. You both, Mr. An and Ms. Wilson, talked about the vision for the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza, and I can appreciate what you outlined in the way of what was covered in the 2004 Public Realm Framework. However, can you zoom in a little bit for us? Because I think a lot of folks in the community rightfully are frustrated, and they understand what was in that document as far as the intended uses of that space. And I appreciate you again, outlining those. But what does the Office of Planning see as the unrealized potential in this space based on what was visioned in that 2004 framework? Because I think the intended uses that you've outlined has not materialized in the way that I believe, a lot of folks who participated in the 1997 community-led planning effort that resulted in that particular community-based document that I understand the 2004 Public Realm Framework was based on. So can you talk a little bit about where OP sees the unrealized potential of that space?
Yeah, sure. As Commissioner Davis knows, OP is undertaking the current efforts of the Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant public life studies. So we did conduct a public life observation and their intersect surveys in July to evaluate the current use conditions of the Civic Plaza. So we did the observation studies in early July during a heat wave, which likely affected the overall usage, but I think that still revealed a lot of insights and key patterns for the Civic Plaza. So overall, by our study, so Civic Plaza is underutilized on non-market days. The non-market day we define as, when there's no farmers markets. So on that day, with only 1 in 130 people stopping to spend, just one of the whole 130 people, they stopped to stay in the plaza and spend time in the plaza rather than, just pass through the plaza. So on average, just 5 people per hour were observed staying in plaza with a significant gender imbalance. From our observation, only 82 of those staying were, so 82% of those staying in the plaza, they were male. So this imbalance, so they reflect maybe a lack of safety or comfort for women in the space. But on the other hand, during the farmers market, the plaza becomes a pretty vibrant, well-used space with 76 people per hour staying. And also the gender balance becomes much more equal. So the market really acts as a very successful activator we see for the plaza, really encouraging the social interaction and making the space feel more welcoming. And also, sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm going to come back to specific what I think you're outlining. I'm going to come back to public space activation. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to get at, and it sounds like you're addressing my question somewhat head on, this space is only being used for the farmers market, which it was traditionally being used for that purpose, a few years before the market, a few years before the plaza was actually, conceived in its current form. Mm-hmm. I guess the problem is that if it's only being used for a discrete number of public programming purposes and then for the farmers market, that's what I'm trying to get at. We're obviously missing something with the realized potential of what this space was supposed to be to serve the entire community. So I will come back to some questions about the public space activation piece. Ms. Wilson,
I would like to just add, I think what Leanne was getting at and sharing what we've observed is that the opportunities beyond the planned events are for a space that's active, even if nothing is going on, a space that is safe for people of no matter what their gender representation is or what have you, that is accessible to everyone. I think that is what we are hoping to realize and what we have identified through our observations, what we are not seeing. And so I think that that unrealized potential really shows up in what we are not seeing in the space, which includes that, lack of diversity during, normal times. That includes a lack of people kind of sitting and socializing. That includes a lack of public art, and those kinds of ongoing activations were not observed and would support increased activity in the plaza.
Okay. And Ms. Wilson, what is OP's general approach to spaces and places like the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza? In other words, as an urban planner, I'm sure, OP is always interested in the role, the meaning, and the actual use of public space, and its effect on social life and the general sense of community it promotes for, neighborhoods across the district. So how would you say this doctrine of urbanism applies to a space like the Civic Plaza in a neighborhood like Columbia Heights? And I want to zoom in there, right? Because we know our neighborhood is very, transient. We have a lot of, visitors who pass through that are not necessarily residents. And so what I'm trying to get at is a little bit of what that unrealized potential is, what that opportunity is, and how that space can serve the unique need for the residents who live here, but also for the visitors who come for the wealth of, businesses and restaurants and all these things that we have here. And so how does that doctrine work in a space like Columbia Heights and the Civic Plaza? Ms. Wilson, you're muted.
From OP's perspective, which is highlighted in the comprehensive plan, we understand that Columbia Heights in particular is a regional center. And the plaza is part of a hyper-local center, but the neighborhood, it's the center of a neighborhood that is also a regional center due to the retail draws, restaurants, and all the things you just named. And so from our perspective, this community and this plaza is one where we want to see more use that is diverse and that is inclusive. I would say that our most important priority when it comes to activation is the inclusivity of the activation. And so I would say that is that's a pretty significant priority. How that plays out is still being worked through in this process currently with the public life study that's ongoing. But that is the goal, is to develop some opportunities and some options. That's through programming, and that's through infrastructural updates. I think that really importantly, and as we can see, that space can be programmed. It's a really good space for programming, and it works well when it's programmed. But we also believe that spaces like this should be part of 18-hour communities that are active, productive, in safe ways throughout the day, and not just when there is an event. And so I think that from our perspective, we're looking to make recommendations around infrastructure improvements.
I'm sorry, you cut out a bit there. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. What is the last thing you heard?
I think that may be on our end, but I think you were saying that I actually don't recall what you last. Can you just
Yep, I can just start over. That's fine. So what I was saying is that our priority is really around the inclusiveness of public space all the time. So I did mention that this is a space where we want to see active as part of an 18-hour, we might call an 18-hour community. A place that's active for all, no matter the time of day, and not just when there's an event planned. And the specific interventions are still being developed through this process. So I don't have them for you today, but we'll have them soon for public comment and input. However, overall, we are looking for not just programmatic improvements, also improvements around resiliency. So that's an update that probably wasn't touched on in 2004, because that was one before our citywide resiliency plan, and also we really weren't using that language then. And so we're looking at resiliency, we're looking at inclusivity, And those are our highest priorities for this space and our goals as we develop the public life study.
Okay, Mr. Either you or Ms. Wilson can take this, but are there other plazas in the district or even in the region that are similar to the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza? And what specific best practices are we learning from those spaces? Again, we're talking about different, neighborhoods, different challenges, many different opportunities.
Yep.
But I'm curious about why this particular plaza, why this particular space seems to be failing in the eyes of, many, whereby others may be, thriving or having significantly less challenges.
I'm sure I can jump in here. And Lee, you might off the top of your head have an example. One of the unique things about the district is that we actually do not have a lot of plazas that are outdoor rooms. If you think about it, many of our public spaces are triangles. There might be a building in the center of it, as opposed to being surrounded by buildings as a room. So I actually think that within the district, this is a pretty unique space, in that it is an outdoor room that is, Dan Reed described it perfectly, and that's not typical for DC. I would say that in other plazas that are, and I'll probably hark back to some of our newer spaces. You look at the Wharf, and you have plazas that are active. A lot of it, they're successful because of infrastructure improvements. They are new. They've had a lot of time to learn from other places. They are activated by retail immediately around those spaces. And even in our plazas that are more traditional to DC, our green triangles, and that kind of thing, we are working on how to improve those as well. Some of those are in downtown. And so our thinking across plazas is always one, what is the draw? How do we bring people here? Depending on the space, it could be the retail component. It could be some kind of programming within the plaza. This is unique in that it has, some programming that's there. We're looking at how accessible the actual plaza is. Is it near a metro? Is it something that you just run into? Do you have to go looking for it in order to come upon it? And if that's the case, how do we make it more accessible? So that's one best practice that we engage in thinking about plazas. Go ahead. It looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I was going to say, so would you not qualify the Eastern Market Metro Plaza as an example that is somewhat comparable to what we face here in Columbia Heights? It's at the metro stations. They have very similar mental and behavioral health challenges in some respects. They also deal with a number of, trash and waste management issues. So I'm just trying to understand, is the Office of Planning working with agencies to kind of capture what's happening there? And again, identify how that can be potentially lifted up and elevated in the current work that's happening with the new envisioning of the Civic Plaza?
Yep. So I just want to highlight a couple of things. From an urban design standpoint, that plaza is not comparable because of the fact that it's in the middle of several intersections. But from an urban design standpoint, geographically, to the center of a community, there are some similarities. It is a plaza, but I think in terms of the form, they're distinct in fairly significant ways. I actually participated on a public life study of that plaza. And that was, I want to say 2018, perhaps. I think it was 2018. And so we have done a similar observation of the space and made some recommendations. At the time, that was on request of the council. So we made those recommendations to the council. In terms of public displays of mental health crises, it's far outside of our purview. And from our perspective, we don't typically support the kind of like hostile architecture that would dissuade people from being in the space. That's not something that our agency supports. And so that isn't necessarily something that we would be making policies about in terms of who is allowed to be there and what that looks like. So just as a rule, that falls outside of our purview as an agency.
Okay. Before I turn to DPR for some initial questions around the vision of the plaza, I'm going to yield to a community member of the committee, Mr. John Henderson.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to get on record the existing conditions at the plaza. I am a 23-year resident of Columbia Heights, and so although I did not participate in the initial planning, I have had the opportunity to observe over the years the steady decline of that site. The plaza is intended to be, the civic and cultural heart of Columbia Heights. It should be the crown jewel, and in that respect, it should be a destination. People should be looking forward to going to Columbia Heights Civic Plaza to, people watch, to participate in events, to eat. It should be a festive, pleasant place that anyone can enjoy. I also want to mention that I happen to be a parks expert. I worked for many years at the Chicago Park District. For several years, I was the director of planning for Chicago Parks. I also worked for many years at the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And I have to say, as a park expert, this site has been totally mismanaged. And there just needs to be a realignment of the resources to bring it back. A civic plaza, if you've never been to one in another city, is immaculate. It has constant maintenance every day. There should be, those landscape panels should be manicured. There should be floral displays, at least seasonally. There should be comfortable seating, shade. It should be just a pleasant place that's almost self-programming. You don't even need additional programming because people just love coming to the space. And that is not what we have right now. The focal point is a portable toilet. It's quite often covered in pigeon guano, which is very unhealthy. So right now it's a health hazard. The grass panels are filled with rat holes. I mean, it's despicable that the city has allowed it to get into this condition. So I just wanted, between the Office of Planning statement and what we're going to hear from DPR, I just wanted to get that on the record about the current condition.
Thank you. And I appreciate that feedback. Also a fellow MNC PPC alum. But your comment made me think of the plaza in Silver Spring. I think is a really good regional example. And I think that you're right that the resources is the critical piece in making sure that all of our power, all of our powers with the council and the mayor and our agency priorities are aligned to ensure those resources are there, because the planning is done and we're doing some more. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're in alignment and just have the resources to do what the community is expecting.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Turning to DPR, Mr. Watts or Mr. Enriquez, I think Mr. Watts is still with us. As an implementing agency that would be taking the recommendations that came from the 2004 Public Realm Framework and will come out of the 2024 Public Life Study, how do spaces like the Civic Plaza fit into the agency's vision of parks improving the quality of life for all residents and, achieving some of those resiliency and sustainability goals that will advance, broad, future for all communities across the district?
So, one of the, I am fairly new to the agency, not the government. And so the director is definitely committed to making sure that all our spaces are livable spaces, that they provide quality opportunities and experiences for DC residents. And so I have, over the last week been looking at the permitting that has happened, because not only just have been the farmers market, there's been nonprofits, other community groups, other type of outreach that's happening there. We're definitely committed to re-examining the space, working with our partners who provide the maintenance and making sure that it's good. As you know, we don't have a person situated there. We don't have a person that's manning that space every day. And so, we have to, think creatively about how we do that and how we partner with you and others to make sure that we are, the space is full, fully utilizing its potential. And so I'm going to listen today and hear the recommendations. I will then, I am your point of contact for the park here at DPR. And so I will take that back to leadership and we will examine some next steps around it.
Just to confirm, so it sounds like you said there is no one individual whose role it is to manage.
It's me.
Okay, so you would be the point person going forward. Now,
That's correct.
within the scope of your portfolio, what would then be the direct responsibility for maintenance operations that you would have? So, are you tracking, say, resident usage of the, splash pad? Are you sharing that information out daily, weekly, monthly with anyone? And so just give me a sense of if we needed to understand the daily, weekly, monthly uses of that space, and we needed someone to kind of be tracking that. Again, we have, community-based organizations and folks, who can kind of facilitate that. But if we're talking about the general maintenance,
So, DPR
permitting and all those needs.
As you know, Commissioner, DPR does not, we do not deliver maintenance to our facility. That's our partners at DGS. But what we're committed to doing is making sure that as like we have all our facilities that we prioritize, continue to prioritize this and make sure that we're delivering that service. And so, we're hearing the issues and hearing the concerns. I will make sure that my team that we incorporate into our regional responsibilities and the like. And so, I mean, I grew up in Mount Pleasant. I went to Bancroft. I know the area. I know the space very well. And so, we definitely are committed to making sure that is a livable, usable space.
Okay. So in looking back over a decade to 2013, some of the agency's project goals in the Play DC, master plan around equitable access, world-class experiences, designed for kind of, beauty, function, creative and diverse activities, fostering community health and sustainability, on and on and on. The new 2022 Ready to Play master plan has very similar goals around health and equity, identity and culture, enhancement and maintenance. How will these overarching goals begin to inform the goals that, you have as the, direct, manager of this space and the department's general view of its role around the Civic Plaza in its existing form? But then again, what will come out of the public life study? And I ask this because I want to make sure that before we leave from this particular section of our conversation, we're thinking about how do we set this conversation and this general strategy we're aiming towards up for success. So understanding those goals in the Ready to Play master plan, how is DPR prepared to deliver to make sure that all of those goals are reflected in the work of the Civic Plaza?
So I'm glad to be honest with you. I think that all of the spaces that's in my portfolio, which includes 70 rec, over 200 parks, are important. It is important that we make sure we maintain it. We make sure that we're communicating around issues, that we're addressing it, that we look at programming opportunities and partnerships. Again, this is unique in the sense that, we have many small independent parks all across the city, right? And so we, a lot of times we partner with friends groups and others to extend our work. And I think that we're going to have to look at similar types of partnerships and the like, so that, that we can make sure we have eyes on it. And so I think that in the next coming weeks, I will, I'm committed to examining that and having some further conversations with you around that.
I look forward to that. I do want to just ask, and I think you may have already answered this in some way, but what mechanisms are currently in place to assure accountability for some of these management pieces that you're saying are, say, the responsibility of, DGS, DDOT? I'm assuming at some point DPR is still the kind of convener, if you will, of these different management functions. So you are still the one pulling all these different levers and making sure that the right, work orders, get to DGS, or, pavers that need to be replaced. DGS is talking to DDOT to make sure that that happens. So I'm trying to get at the crux of what has failed at the Civic Plaza is everybody's kind of pointing the finger at each other when it's time to kind of get certain things done. And this goes way back. And I will actually get to another point that I want to make, but there just seems to be a lot of finger pointing because there was a Washington Post article back in 2008, March 12th, 2008 to be exact. And at that time, DDOT cited the delay in that project because they said, well, who's going to run this? Who's going to manage this? Who's responsible for all these different things? Going forward, understanding the vital, recommendations that will come out of the public life study, where does the agency see its role in terms of solidifying some kind of accountability, stream framework so that things can actually get done when they need to get done?
So I think that you have it was a very loaded question, Commissioner. So I'm going to try to answer it carefully. One, I do not believe that the agency is finger pointing, right? We partner with our sister agencies around all of our assets and all around our district assets, and we, based on funding, availability, what we see is immediate need. If we know what's happening, we address it, and we meet with our partners on a regular basis around these issues. And the same priority that we give to all of our assets, we definitely would do that. I guess, and so that part of maintenance, that part will be addressed accordingly, and we'll do an assessment and we'll figure out what are some of the next steps. And I will task my staff, with doing regular checks and the like I do with all my other parts and the thing that's under my purview. The other part around programming, again, I think that, as I realized, I do not have a staff person assigned to that site every day. So I think that we're going to have to explore similar other relationships like we have at other parks and, with friends groups and other community groups and the like, to make sure there's programming there. We as we do permit that space. And so individuals, in order to utilize that space, do go through a permitting process around that. And so we do have some control of that, and we'll continue that. I think that some of this would be DPR led, but some of it has to be community led, because part of that design is also about community wanting to engage and be there to do things and the like. And so, we're willing to partner with the community around that. And I look forward to partnering with you so that we can engage the community in a substantive way and looking at what are some of the short-term plans that we can support. And the community have things. I've looked at some of the permitting that's happened there. You've had education opportunities been there. You've had health related opportunities that the community has led there. So there, there's a precedent for this. I think there's ways that we can expand it working together.
All right, thank you, Mr. Watts. So I want to zoom in to the present and really discuss that despite what's been laid out so far regarding the vision and the intended uses of the plaza and how it's kind of struggled to fulfill its potential, I want to really begin to now talk a little more intently about maintenance issues, safety concerns, some of what the Office of Planning was alluding to about the underutilization, both in the way of kind of cultural and social programming, and generally intended use and some of the other social challenges that we see. Mr. Honor, Ms. Wilson, before I bring DGS into the conversation, can you discuss any recommendations that OP identified in the 2004 Public Realm Framework, specifically about kind of guiding and stewarding public realm, management writ large, but specifically focusing in on the Civic Plaza and what that kind of public realm management stewardship should look like?
Sure, I can jump in on that. So in that plan, our hope then was that the there would be a business improvement district or some kind of like business-led entity that would manage public space. And what we have found is that there is not a lot of support from the major landowners. DC USA is there, and there just hasn't been an interest. But that was our hope throughout the district. And we talked earlier about some of the other, maybe not so much plazas in the sense that this is a plaza, other public spaces that work really well are managed by such an entity. And so that was our hope. The entities that own land in this area have not been interested. But that is, something that I think needs to be revisited because that doesn't seem like a direction that we can move forward at this point due to the lack of interest. But that was the hope at the time.
Sure. And I want to zoom in on what you was saying before about with this being a regional center and understanding that, you talked about it being a regional center, but having kind of a hyper local center focus for, maybe the residents who live in the immediate proximity. But if it's seen as a regional center, and we know that we do not have the buy-in and the collective will of, major land and property owners to be a part of this effort, is there not a sense that the district then needs to step back in and say, we're going to undertake either a concerted effort to bring all of these stakeholders to the table? We're going to convene, whether that's, DMPED or someone that can get property owners to the table to say, we need you to come to some kind of, agreement about what comes next. Or for the district itself to come up with some kind of, specific financing models that may work outside of a, bid tax, but some other financing model that can work for that space. Is that something that is going to be spoken to in some way in the new public life study? Is OP still examining the possibilities of what could come in the way of a, breakthrough on a bid conversation? Help me understand what we can do, because I know DGS is going to say, we do all we can do. We do as much as we have the funding for. DPR's already pretty much said the same thing. I think DPW will say we do as much, waste management, as we can. We need help, right? So a bid is probably the only entity that can accomplish a lot of that work. How can OP help push this conversation forward?
So I think it's in terms of the conversations, the high level conversations, they've happened. I am not confident that that would change tomorrow. I think there are other opportunities, like a Main Street, which that was something that we support always. I think that there are already entities that are taking on some of those, moving in that direction, taking on some of the roles that a Main Street would take on. So I think that is another really great opportunity. We have them. I was working in Congress Heights, and there's some there. We don't have a bid there. In many cases, bids require really high, like a bunch of really high earning landowners that can afford to tax themselves. And I suspect, and which kind of bears out in our analysis, that a lot of our local businesses would not be prime for that kind of type of the fees and everything that goes into a bid. The primary landowner for that has not been interested. And that would be who would be carrying the water for that effort. So I do think there are some other opportunities. It's something that we do intend to speak to in our in the studies about some ideas about management. We are working with consultants that have done this work in many other places, and so we'll be pulling from precedents around not just locally but around the country. So it's definitely something that's on our minds.
I mean, we're talking 20 years later, and we're still having the same conversation. And, my fear is that we'll be having this conversation 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And I
appreciate that. I think it really just comes down, and it's government. And so we are siloed. It's how we're chartered. The Office of Planning cannot make those types of financial decisions. I think that it definitely requires more voices in this conversation and more collaboration. Because I think it's true that all of the agencies that are here have a finite amount of resources or purview. For us, we don't have any resources, but we do have, a purview around planning and some strategizing. And I think it requires probably more people. And I would love to talk more about who we can pull into that conversation, because I think that you're right. And I totally understand that fear about being in this place 20 years from now. But I think, as I said before, I think it really does come to resources.
I look forward to having that follow-up as well. Mr. Stokes, I want to now bring in DGS to weigh in a little bit on what it sees as its role at the plaza. So OP's 2018 Public Space Activation and Stewardship Guide identifies a range of district and federal government, quote, supporters and facilitators, unquote, listing agencies involved in public space creation, regulation, and stewardship. It identified DGS as, quote, responsible for construction, management, and maintenance of all district facilities and land. One, is that not an accurate description of the agency's role? It sounded like in your opening statement, you said that it is. And so the agency acknowledges the role it plays in kind of overall managing what's happening in that space in the way of construction and general, landscaping and just kind of, groundskeeping. But can you clarify what the agency sees as its role under that general umbrella of responsibility, and where the agency sees where maybe it has some shortcomings, whether that be funding, whether that be, just general matters that may not be under your purview? Where can I help you? Where can I help the agency find the opportunity to maybe take on a little bit more under that umbrella? So can you talk a little bit about what DGS sees as its role?
Sure. Thank you so much. Again, I think the things I spelled out at the beginning in my testimony are things that we are solely responsible for and under our purview. I think, as we all can witness here with Columbia Heights Civic Plaza, it is a bouillabaisse of different organizations, government agencies, business owners. It's the largest, smallest area that I can recall in the city that has so many other players. I think if I counted, I looked at the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza Connective Series by District Bridges, who was doing a study on this over the last 2 years. And I think there might be about almost 30 to 40 different stakeholders that are involved in Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. More specifically, on the DGS, again, I think we have a kind of clear understanding of what our purview is, again, from the electricity to the decorative spray feature, again, that we're going to be able to renovate and modernize within the next year. But then you have certain other things like the pavers, right? It's DGS, we go in and we make sure those pavers are okay, but we're working with our colleagues, our sister agency at DDOT, to make sure we have those decorative pavers in order to place them down. We're working with DOEE and DPR on what we want to do with some of those other areas. And we're also working with some community groups on, say, like I call them the big planters or the grassy areas. So we're also doing some maintenance, right? We go in and we might mow, but we are working with places like Career Path, who helped us on with the hedging, or with Livable City Group, who is helping us on some of with the trees. So it's really a collaborative. We are all going to have to really just get a little stronger about. And I have to say, I was at DPR for 15 years and been at DGS now for 5 years. And I don't think Columbia Heights Civic Plaza is where we want it to be, but I don't think where it was as well. Because again, I do see a little bit of uptick. I think the more we have more meetings, I think we have to have consistent meetings, which bring lots of stakeholders. The folks here, we're only probably 1/10, 1/16 of the total group of folks that have to be involved when you talk about Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. So I would say, from a DGS standpoint, we have a kind of a clear view on what our purview is and how we work together with our clients, sister agencies, government agencies, getting prepared for this, and just talking with my colleague Sean, talking with our folks. We're like, okay, well, this is what we can do. And let's make sure that what we can do, we're kind of stepping it up and working with our client, our sister agencies and some of these other community groups. Again, whether it's a bid, whether it's a Main Street, whether it's, the council's office is in on this, the CA's office, everybody's really wants to see this thing succeed. So to make a long story short, I'm not sure that I would say we're at a lack of financial resources when it comes to the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. I think it's just going to be a matter, again, of just making sure that everybody comes to the table and we have more probably consistent meetings to address particular issues.
Thank you for that. I want to hone back in on something you said about, yes, the 2022 report that was done by District Bridges did highlight a significant number of stakeholders that in some way feel like they have a role or they have a particular interest in the Civic Plaza. But I want to focus in on, you talked about, the folks being here is kind of 1/10. Obviously, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And I think that that's always been the problem with the management of the Civic Plaza. Everybody assumes, and Ms. Wilson just said, we're very siloed, government agencies kind of operate in their purview and, they do just what they can do and they kind of, move on. And if a piece gets left, they say, well, that wasn't my responsibility. So how do we streamline the major players, right? DGS, DPR, DDOT, DPW to a certain extent, DSLBD, which is going to facilitate a lot of the work that Career Path DC is doing. How do we streamline that? You're talking about having more consistent meetings. It's my understanding the council member's office, Ward 1 council member Brianne Nadeau, held several convenings over many years that dealt with these issues around, management and maintenance, but also some of the other behavioral health and, social services needs that we see. She convened meetings for, I think, roughly 2 years. They fell by the wayside. The ANC has been at this for decades. Since literally the plaza was completed. So when you talk about meetings and being able to connect regularly, one, how do we do that with the actors we know can make a difference? Because yes, there's going to be a lot of folks who have an interest in seeing the plaza do whatever it's going to do. But we want to make sure that it's just well maintained, that it serves everybody. Can you talk about how you see DGS being a convening authority to just streamline all of that? Because I would like to be able to go to one person and say, hey, I need an update meeting put together in the next, 2 weeks to a month. How can we get that planned? Having to go to 5 or 6 different people that then need to bring 30 other people to the table, I think is the problem.
In my 20 years in working in district government, it seems to me the most successful plans, plazas, parks, community things are normally led by community. They take a very active interest in those communities, and whether those meetings are once a quarter, they are consistent. And I wouldn't say necessarily that the city says, let's convene those meetings. It's community interest that says this is our home. We are, we want to see things happen in our community. So whether it's I'm not going to name it, it can be anywhere. We have done it with ANCs. We've done it with community-based organizations. Somebody says, but it's normally led from community. Because again, at the district, as DGS is, DPR, DPW, we're doing, as I said, we do 1,000 municipal buildings and properties across the city. So it probably I wouldn't say what DPR says, well, let's do this quarterly Columbia Heights Civic Plaza meeting. Somebody within the community says, whether it's you or somebody else says, let's do a quarterly meeting. I probably would say with those meetings, some of the meetings that we have been to, if you have them quarterly, it kind of really comes together. But they have to be consistent until there's a flow, right? So I would say, again, I think from some of those meetings, I think some positive things came out of it. I think that However it came to be, there's money now to get that fountain fixed, that the decorative spray park. It's going to get fixed. And I would dare say that that was probably because the community is like, it's broken, it's not, doesn't look good. So I think there is movement. Again, I think I repeat that there's consistent movement. I'm not going to sit here and say today that I think it's DGS that should convene quarterly meetings on the Civic Plaza. But I think somebody in the community that is more hands-on and says, hey, you know, district bridges, hey, the bid, hey, the Main Street. You in the community, you have a closer touch to those folks than any particular one government agency, if I can say.
I,
No,
I'm going to clarify. What I meant was, yes, we would, as the ANC, working with a range of community stakeholders, we would be convening those meetings. What I was getting at was, how do we make sure we have a trusted government partner that can say, we're going to make sure that everyone can show up, right? Because it's one thing to say, we're going to have regular, meetings and then folks don't come. So that's what I was getting at. But
absolutely.
I will let you.
So I'll
clarify
answer
your
real
point
quickly,
to that.
then I'll let my colleague speak. So just like DPR said, hey, I'm the person for DPR. Sean and I have been at the previous meetings over the last couple of years from DGS. I think you are starting to gather. I think if you have folks here today, I think as you start to go along, some of these folks do remain consistent. Some folks move on, but I hope I answered the question. Again, I think you started to hear, again, DPR said that they're the person. You might be the person for your agency. Sean and I have been the face of this for many years. So I think you start to gather those folks if and again, I'm going to something after this because they wanted to see a consistent and not a person, this person this week, that person next month. They're like, we want to see somebody consistent. So it's going to be up to me. And so depending upon what the conversation is, you may see me, you may see Sean from a DGS standpoint. I hope I kind of answered that question.
No, and that is good to know that we could trust that you guys will be the faces that we see on an ongoing basis. So,
hey, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Just wanted to echo your comments and John's comments. I do think having one person or one, like if you don't have somebody responsible, things fall through the cracks, right? And we've been in many of those meetings, and District Bridges was amazing, and Councilman Nadeau's office was amazing, and I do feel like we had significant traction on those couple of years because the expectation that we were going to meet, we knew we had to follow up. Because it's an unmanned park, as our DPR colleagues alluded to, there's a little bit of a challenge with being up to speed on like regular maintenance issues because we don't have someone there. And so typically in my team, we wouldn't really get involved in this like springtime when we're getting the spray park ready and we start doing those meetings. I thought the time in this meeting was rough for me because end of the fiscal year, but I do think it's great that we're having it now because I would love to get started on preparing for 25, like right now, putting some things in place. Outstanding a little bit, and I've got to run shortly. So if you have any facilities maintenance questions, I just want to get that out. I know I saw on the list the solar panel array was an issue. I think the last couple of meetings we had in 23, the consensus was that they were no longer functional and we may want to remove them. I think we got some preliminary costing for that. I don't have that handy today, but we can research that. I know there was some discussions about the planters and the rodents around there, whether we should remove them or what we put in their place. Never really got a firm consensus, but I know that was a topic that I expect to, reoccur. And then really excited about the spray park repairs. That actually did stem partly from one of those meetings when Nadeau was up there with us and seeing the issues and being able to get some traction to provide some additional funding. Citywide, I think it's like $2.5 million, but 500,000 is just for the Columbia Heights. So the mosaic, those tiles get cracked every year. They kind of don't allow us to enjoy the vision of the artist. I love to get the dancing sprays working the way they did originally. And then just a ton of upgrades down below deck. So I think there'll be a market difference this summer, but I feel like we need to convene at least every quarter.
I think almost kind of we put something on the calendar. If EOM buys into it, we'll all be there. I will be taking you up on that. I'm going to do two things very quickly because I know you just noted you have to go. I want to note for the record that we've been joined by District 1A04 Commissioner Jeremy Sherman, who's an ex officio member of the committee. He's also the chair of the Committee on Small Business and Economic Development for the commission. So I'm going to recognize my colleague for an opening statement, and then I'm going to turn to Mr. Henderson for an additional round of questions and then come back to Mr. Sherman, and then I need to go back to DGS for some follow-up questions on the splash pad.
All right, let me get my tech working. Is it working? All right. Hi, everyone, here and digitally or virtually. Sorry, I'm a bit late. I'm wearing a few hats. As Commissioner Thomas Davis says, I'm commissioner for 1A04, which is northern part of Columbia Heights. Starts at Park Road, so just adjacent to the Civic Plaza. I have a lot of neighbors that talk to me about the Civic Plaza. I'm also a small business and economic development committee chair and vice chair of ANC 1A. So multiple hats here and lenses. I'm sorry if I'm kind of covering anything you've already covered. I want to thank you for being here today, for your time. I know time is precious, and you have a lot of different competing priorities all across the city. And I don't know if Commissioner Thomas Davis already mentioned this, but ANC 1A is the most populous ANC, actually, and the densest of all of them. And I think sometimes commissioners and neighbors have felt like we don't always get the attention we might deserve from some agencies, and some of our public spaces may not get the attention it deserves. So I appreciate you being here to strategize with us and think about how we can improve our public spaces, especially the Civic Plaza, which is the core center part. And I think it's been 25 years since really any changes have been made to it. I don't really have much else to say. I'll just note concerns for me. I've had a lot of conversations about the bird situation and pigeon situation at the Civic Plaza. Have you discussed that already?
Not yet.
So you'll get to it. I'll just make a few comments on it. I'm not sure when it started, but for several years now, there have been individuals who come out almost daily to drop pieces of bread or other food, or food gets left. And there are a group of pigeons, that hundreds of them, that come almost every day during the warm months. And a lot of different organizations and entities have tried to put up signs and try to deter this, but there really hasn't been anything that worked. And I know in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about birds here, but those droppings are a health hazard and have really deteriorated the pavers and tiles that make up the Civic Plaza. And it's dirty, it's uninviting, and our farmers market operates on top of those tiles. It's just really unsanitary. And I'm not here to complain about it as much as I am to say, what have you seen elsewhere, if you have knowledge about this, that might be strategies to employ to solve this problem? Because I'm not sure I've heard from anyone about how we can solve this other than completely redoing the Civic Plaza, which might be the way to go. So that's a top concern I hear from neighbors. And I don't know if you all are the right folks to strategize with that, about that. And then I'll just say the splash park, I think you were just referencing that. That's also a core piece of it. I would encourage us not to think just about refurbishing it and turning it back on, but also redesigning it completely to make sure it's more sustainable for the long term. And that's the entire Civic Plaza. So I'll stop there. I don't have any further questions at this time. Thank you again for your time. Thanks for organizing this, and I'll pass it back.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. I'm going to recognize community member John Henderson for, I believe, a round of questions.
I just had a question about elevated maintenance. So I know that you've been to successful plazas in other cities. You know what they look like. You know what's involved in maintaining them. It requires much, much more than what you've been able to do at the Civic Plaza. You need that manicured lawn. You need the floral displays. You need literally someone there every day. And in some of these places, it's, if someone leaves, paper behind from their sandwich, or the ice cream falls out of the cone, someone is there within an hour to clean it up and get it out of the way so that it's clean. How can we get that level of cleanliness and service at the Civic Plaza? What will it take?
I think anybody can answer that, but I'll jump in first. So I think from my vantage point, from what I see, you're absolutely correct. The city is going to be able to do, kind of as you said, Commissioner, we're going to be able to do what we can do to that level of attention. Unless I'm wrong, and again, somebody can correct me. it seems like that's when the bids or the main streets kind of take over because that's what they do. The main streets and the bids, they are, like you say, they're there, they're on the spot. They have the nice little uniforms colored depending upon what neighborhood they're in. And they basically monitor almost, I mean, I don't want to say 24/7, but they monitor to the extent that you are speaking to. I think from a city standpoint, that is not something that is probably sustainable for a government agency to do to that extent. Again, we might be able to do maybe once a year going in and trying to beautify a planter, but like you're saying, if there's, hey, we want to see nice flowers, you know, there are specific flowers, there's sensitive flowers, probably a bidder in Main Street, or a lot in DPR can speak to this. Again, we have friends of groups. The friends of groups, oh boy, when I was at DPR, those friends of groups, they were so good about their communities and their parks. They wouldn't even allow us to go in and do anything. They were like, no, no, no. We just need for you to sign a piece of paper to say that you will give us the responsibility to maintain it, to landscape it, to make sure the flowers, because we don't want you cutting down shrubs that are not shrubs or really ornate green. They wanted us to be hands off. So I think those friends of groups are also really, really, really engaged community members who want to see their community rise to another level than just kind of like what the normal might be from a city service.
Yeah, we created, and I was involved in the creation of a park friends group for the Civic Plaza. And it kind of dwindled after a year or so because most of the issues were DGS related and DPR just said, well, we don't do maintenance. And so, you know, we needed, in order to maintain the planters, we needed a water source. And so, well, where can we get a hose bib so that volunteers can maintain and water those panels? And so, well, that's DGS. And, you know, there were problems with the electrical box because, you know, it wasn't secured and people were using it for illicit purposes. And so, and they said, well, that's DGS, that we don't have anything to do with that. So anyway, it just seemed to be, you know, no one was cooperating and the whole thing just kind of like went away.
So I think with some of those things like that, like I don't know about the water source, but just kind of doing a biopsy of just that. So if that's a funding issue, or if it's not something that's in the current design, or it's not something that is regular maintenance and upkeep, it's a new addition, right? I don't know how much it would cost to get a water source, but that's something that, you know, would say, hey, city, hey, somebody can that be put into a budget? And then your water source comes.
You want to cover that?
Hmm?
They're gonna do a hose bid.
A hose bid?
Yeah, I think we do that.
Okay, so we can revisit it. There you go.
So, you know, this is Watts from DPR. I think that you know, we have to do a reset. And, you know, I understand past issues and the like, but if we're going to move forward, I think, you know, and we probably have past strategies where you have other friends groups, or other experiences, and where it didn't work out. Let's give it a new try, right? I think that we want the space to be one that is first class. The community deserve it. I think so. Let's meet. Let's discuss it. Let's plan. Let's put our best foot forward. I don't think that anyone, you know, the reality of it is that, yes, each of us have our defined roles, but I don't think that that is what the hindrance is that, I mean, I think a part of it is that many times we have to do basis. There's definitely financial and resource allocations related to our decisions. But I mean, if we're partnering and that we have active partners, we respond. And I've seen our agency do it. I've seen DGS do it. I've seen other folks. You know, we will pivot to support what the community needs are. But I think that, you know, if we continue to rehash what didn't work, you know, we limit the conversation of what we're able to do and accomplish going forward. So I'm committed. to being part of the solution. Do we have all the answers? No, but I think together we can figure it out. I think that together we can definitely make it a better place.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Watts. I do want to say we're spending time, as you say, rehashing the past and examining these issues because the public needs to understand what has hindered the success of this space. I absolutely want to turn the page. It seems like we have a, eager group of individuals who are dedicated to the success of this space. So I look forward to continuing this conversation and ensuring that we are meeting on a regular basis. I want to quickly, I want to piggyback on what Mr. Henderson said about the Park Partners Group and really understanding some of the challenges around what, I guess was DGS's role and, kind of what it saw as things that it was willing to do, unwilling to do, and, things like that. So I want DPR to address this first, and then I'll let DGS chime in, and then I'll go back to the splash pad. So, Mr. Watts, understanding the agency's, it seems like willingness to welcome additional partnership efforts and to continue this conversation to drive a space like the Civic Plaza, is there a general approach to maintenance that you can establish with DGS as a baseline of core services? It sounds like DGS is only focused on electrical, splash pad, and I believe Mr. Stokes said the lawn in terms of managing that. Are there additional core services that DPR is willing to kind of pitch in and take a lead on? And I'm going to ask DPW to also chime in here because another acute issue that we have is just general trash and waste management there. So I would like to understand going forward, is there a different waste management strategy that we can employ? Maybe it's different, litter cans, something that may be a little bit larger. Maybe it's a different type of litter can in the way that you can't just have an open, top to just dump things in. So, Mr. Watts, talk about a baseline of core services that the agency may be willing to take on. And then is there an enhanced level of service that we can discuss that a potential park partner group can take on in conjunction with the clean team, and then any work that DPW may be willing to pitch in on in the way of waste management?
So I'm going to be fair to you, Commissioner. I have to go back to the director and give her my suggestions and some of my thoughts, and I'm willing to get back to you on that. I can't commit, to agency. And
Not necessarily a commitment, but just.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we do, we have many, I have over 70 recs and parks. I mean, we work with our DGS partners to make sure that they're clean, make sure that they're replacing roofs and windows and doors. And so the same level of care that we have there, we're definitely committed to do that. And all those levers and processes are in place. But I think that you're asking more of that. Right. I think that you're not just that's baseline. I think that there's some more things that I'm assuming you're asking, and which means that whether I'm going to send folks around on a regular basis, in a much increased frequency, and the like along those lines. And so, and not that I'm opposed to that, but also I'm not in a position to say that today. And so there's a baseline of care that we will continue to do. We continue to work with our partners at DGS and others to make sure that we provide the quality of care. And then there's some other ideas that I have that I need to discuss with the director, and I'm willing to get back to you and other fellow commissioners regarding that.
I look forward to that. I will definitely be sure to follow up. I do just want to note there is a willingness to bring the park partner organization back. And I think if we can harness that and if we can work to establish a framework that allows everyone here to continue this conversation, to, as Mr. Stokes said, try to meet on a quarterly basis, to keep an open line of, communication to track things that are happening there, make sure we have some transparency into what, neighbors may be reporting that they're maybe not coming to the ANC with. I want to make sure that we can help you, help the community. Does DPW have a sense of, because the clean team, God bless them, they do God's work. And I know that they try incredibly hard to just manage that space just daily, right? They do a couple of sweeps in the morning. We often joke that, because I usually see them every weekend. We usually joke that, they'll come in and do a, clean at 7 or 8 by noon or 1. It's like they never touched it. What more? And I have talked to Director Shug Evans about additional ways DSLBD can maybe surge a little bit more funding. She didn't commit to anything, but she said she would take a look at it. What role can DPW play in assisting with efforts? I don't think there's traditionally been a partnership that has been played between clean teams and DPW. I know you do like the neighborhood helping hands program to kind of get community folks involved in that effort, but is there more that DPW can do?
So it probably is more that we can do. But like you just mentioned, trying to find a different size can. We were actually looking into providing some more cans. In what part of the city we haven't decided yet, but we were looking into trying to find cans like have a push door can where the can now is just open and anybody can bring a trash bag sitting on top. And the thing about that is once they sit the trash bag on top, citizens and everybody think the bottom of the can is full. Actually, the can is not full, it's just the bag that's on top. But I mean, I could take this information back to our director and our leadership, and we can put our heads together to see what else more we can do to help the community heights area out.
Please do, and I'll look forward to having that conversation in concert with the council member, because I know she has also been thinking about creative ways to think about, waste management efforts, particularly, trying to pilot some new things. So I'd love to have that conversation in concert with her, particularly as we had, probably a missed opportunity with the current budget starting October 1, but definitely thinking about what we can do for the next fiscal year. I want to go back very quickly to the splash pad. As my colleague, Commissioner Sherman said, this is one of the most essential features of the Civic Plaza. This so-called resonance fountain doubles as a splash pad, but it's also notably one of the district's emergency cooling stations. According to the District Bridges report from 2023, during much of 2022, only about 6 of the 22 jets was working, partially functional. And it seems like that stemmed from storm damage that happened in the spring of 2016 and maybe never was fixed.
I can provide additional context. So the storm damage was actually the vault flooded. We had to replace all the electrical systems. Didn't really impact those sprays. Much of that is to debris and dirt and sand getting into them. They have to just be cleaned out pretty much almost daily. And so we do have a spray park technician. They service each of our 33 spray parks in the city. They hit them every day to make sure the water chemistry is balanced, everything's running. But we have to do a little bit better job of making sure they have some PMing time, meaning when the fountain's down, they can get in there and actually clean all those sprays out. So we think we did a better job in 23 and 24, but we still have some areas to improve. And we're working with our contractor on that.
I will follow up with you on that as far as getting a clear understanding of that schedule. I do know that the splash pad is offline at certain points, so I would just love to know when they're out there, because right now it's still partial, like it's almost functional,
Like today, like now?
like now.
Okay.
And
Follow
so, you know, the water pressure is very, very low. It's beyond it has defaulted to the use as a splash pad, but when you talk about the central focus of what this was supposed to be, to add a little bit more of a focal point to the space, it was to the point you said it was intended to.
We're supposed to
do-
dance,
Yeah,
and
it was-
yeah, I mean,
It was meant to do a
yeah,
lot of those
yeah.
things. So I want to hone in on something because I'm very confused about the number you guys threw out about the $450,000 that has been allocated in the upcoming FY 25 budget. The council member,
It's this current budget. Like this work is taking place, some of it's taking place now.
okay,
Not at excuse me, ANC, not specifically to the Columbia Heights Spray Park, but as part of the overall spray park project.
so the $450,000 in the current fiscal year is for all spray parks.
No, the total is 2 to 2.5 million for, I want to say there were like 9 sites that we targeted, of which this one was one of them, but this one, they're doing it later in the year. Is it later this year?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want
It's
to,
not 25, but it's.
Now.
It's.
Okay.
okay, so I want to understand something because the council member's office conveyed to us that the mayor put forward $750,000 for the splash pad renovation. So are we talking about two different numbers here, or is that the same number? Because in a budget update that we received, and it is in the budget for $750,000
For 25?
for for the current fiscal year for 24.
We'll get back. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Following up, I'm sorry, looks,
I think that my understanding, I think it was for the civic. As well as for our-
just a note for those listening in, Estelle McKinney, who's a constituent services specialist in the office of Ward 1 Council Member Brianne Nadeau, was just noting that apparently the $750,000 that was allocated was split between the Civic Plaza and the 14th and Girard Street splash park. Going back to your note about just the general, and to my colleague's question about, do we need to reimagine the general function of either the fountain, the pavers, that entire space? And I know, you know, OP will have some thoughts, questions about this. I know District Bridges and other community stakeholders have said, well, let's renovate, not reimagine. When we talk about the tiles and the pavers and just the general financial strain that it may take to manage and, you know, provide upkeep of that, do we need to think about replacing those? Do we need to move in a different direction and find something that is a little more resilient, sustainable, and provides us a different level of service to just manage it better?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have the answer for that, but I do think that based anecdotally on my conversation with some of the people up there, that the mosaic as it's currently envisioned has a lot of sentimental and appeal to the community. And we've met the artist. I know he put a lot of work into it. She's been very helpful with like providing us replacement tiles for it. So not sure if we want to go in that direction, but that may be something that just help inform it. Like I think there's a benefit to it, right?
And at the end of the day, again, we just really at DGS, we build, maintain, sustain. So as far as design, functionality, what it's really want, I think that's a conversation, again, probably DPR as a programmatic partner here and probably the community with what they want to see. And then you tell DGS, this is what we want. We got some money for it. You go and build it.
But I think it's important to have your perspective because, as you said, if you have to then sustain it
Yep.
and
Mhm.
maintain it,
Mhm.
that's a financial cost. If
Mhm.
you have to keep going back to replace those tiles, and at some point, those tiles are going to run out, right? And so what happens then? So I just want us to think about that as we continue this conversation. I want to go back very quickly to DPR. You talked about not really having anyone to manage just the general space. What does your park ranger team do? And are they involved with helping to facilitate and guide anything as far as stewardship at the plaza?
So, I mean, they're for safety, make sure that, things are running. But what I mean is there's no building there. There's no staff person that's there every day, right?
Right.
And so that's what I was referring to. So not that we don't have individuals that will go check on the space, check it out, make sure it's okay, see if there's any needs, if we hear complaints, respond. We definitely have that. But there's no person that's responsible for sitting there every day in that space.
Got it.
And let me add on to that. As of January of this year, DGS is now working with OUC with 311, actually 311. And so that because we realized that in the DPR portfolio, there are many parks that are unmanned. And so now if residents actually want to, I won't bore you, but work orders are normally done through a particular facility. But at DPR, because there are so many parks that are unmanned, residents can now go in, or whoever can go in and actually call 311 and say, hey, we see a swing that's broken, or we see this fountain that's not working, or that you can now call 311 and put in the work, and then that work will come to DGS, and then DGS will, if it was Columbia Heights, with this and say, okay, yeah, it's for us to help the trash or pick up the trash, or it's DP, whatever it is. So that is a new funnel that, because there are many parks and plazas that are unmanned.
Got it.
So that is another resource, a new resource.
I want to go back to another point that my colleague, Commissioner Sherman, brought up. So the commission unanimously passed a resolution that I sponsored proposing some steps that could greatly improve overall sanitation at the Civic Plaza. And I guess I should also clarify on the record, and for those here, I represent the Civic Plaza in my district, so I'm more acutely focused on and talking to residents about these issues on a regular basis. But we talked about launching a public awareness campaign and erecting permanent language accessible signage in multiple areas of the Civic Plaza, but the general public realm, to discourage the feeding of pigeons, as well as the installation of bird deterrent devices, working with the property owners in the immediate area. A statutory status update is due to the commission on this particular matter next week. So, Mr. Watts, do you have any thoughts or ideas? And again, I know you'll say you need to take this back and talk to Director Freeman, but is there any steps you believe the agency can take? Because I think if there is one particular thing that can transform this space immediately, is the elimination of the pigeons and the waste and public hazard they present. So is there some short-term, early next steps we can take to deal with the bird issue?
I would have to talk to general counsel about whether I have any legal authority to do anything related to pigeons and folks feeding pigeons. We have no police authority or any type of enforcement authority in that matter that I know of. But I definitely have to explore that. I mean, I'm a fifth generation. Yeah, I'm a fifth generation Washingtonian. I just don't even know. I mean, folks been feeding pigeons long. I've been in the city 52 years. I really don't even know how to even answer that, Commissioner. That's definitely a discussion I have to go back and have with general counsel.
Certainly, I can appreciate that. I'm not saying this needs to be made into a public safety incident, or this needs to, lead to a police situation in terms of an arrest or anything. I guess what I'm getting at is the space is unusable because of the pigeons. So, when you talk about just the general enjoyment of the space, it cannot be used. This is a DPR asset, and I would assume that you want residents to be enjoying the space for the intended purpose, right? So what I'm getting at is,
I don't know what to do about.
Are you seeing this in other spaces? One, I mean, are you seeing this?
I see birds everywhere. Yes, I do. I mean, we see, Yes.
Mr. Watts, I invite you to come to the Civic Plaza, and I would be
I've,
happy
I've been to
to.
the Civic. I've been to the Civic Plaza. I grew up at 39 Mount Pleasant. I know the Civic Plaza. I lived on my mother.
Have you
lived
been there
on-
recently, sir?
Yes, sir. I've been. Yes, absolutely. I have. Family live on Columbia Road and Gerard Street. I'm very
Well,
familiar. I
well,
promise you.
I'm gonna share some recent photos and videos for you to share with Director
I'm
Freeman,
not
just to.
disputing. I'm not disputing what you're saying, Commissioner. What I'm trying to understand is what role and what authority I have to address pigeon droppings on the plaza, in which I just don't
Sure.
know. I'm not disagreeing with that as a problem. What I'm saying is that I don't know if the agency, what authority I have to do anything about it, and that's
Sure.
why I have accepted your counsel. So I'm not a disagreement that there's an issue. I'm not a disagreement that it happened.
Well, we have a status report due next week, so I look forward to you providing more
Oh.
clarity about the agency's ideas and thoughts on how to address this, if any. But again, it is a problem, and I hope we can work with the agency to figure out some next steps. I'm going to
Okay.
turn to my colleague, Commissioner Sherman.
Yeah, I just have some follow-up questions real quick, maybe for Mr. Watson, our DPW representative as well. I know birds are all over the city, and it's not necessarily unique to the Civic Plaza, but it does feel like it's a bigger problem here than it might be in other places. I'm just curious, in the DPW world and cleaning maintenance, in the DPR world in terms of park maintenance, maybe in the DGS world in terms of maintain, are there any strategies that you've heard of, that you've seen deployed maybe in other cities that we could explore? Maybe you don't know if they work, but anything that you've heard or seen as it relates to maintaining those, cleaning and then maintaining and preventing the bird droppings that are just caked into the Civic Plaza right now. I know we're talking about birds here, but this is one of the #1 complaints from neighbors because it's so unsanitary, and it's our farmers market. Food is served here. Kids play on this space, and I've had so many conversations about it, and no one has provided any ideas. So I'm just asking if anyone has things they've heard about. Maybe they don't know if it works, but things we could potentially explore. I open that up to anybody.
Hey, Commissioner, thank you. I don't have an answer for you, but when we've dealt with challenging things like this, sometimes it helps to engage experts in other agencies. I know DDOT has an urban forestry division has been very helpful dealing with trees and other migratory birds. So I'm happy to have somebody on my team reach out to them and just kind of see what's out there. I can commit on behalf of DGS to at least doing a quarterly pressure wash, so we can go up there and do a pressure wash. We can probably get that done first couple of weeks of September. But I can coordinate with Mr. Stokes and he can let you guys know. It's not going to be a long-term solution because I'm sure there'll be droppings in the interim, but hopefully they'll abate a little bit over the winter months and not be as much of an impact to the visitor's experience. But yeah, I think we need to engage some experts because I don't know. We'll have to research it.
Definitely. So we're going to turn now to what I want to talk about as far as greater coordination for improvements and renovations. We've been talking about this a little bit, but I want to turn the lens to placekeeping and stewardship. So maybe taking some of the general maintenance issues out of it, but focusing on, programming and other aspects. So Mr. An, bringing OP back into the conversation here, without giving too much away before the public life study is concluded and the findings and recommendations are released, do you think OP would agree with the conclusions drawn in the 2023 report by District Bridges that any public realm design should consider what is working now and not wholly reimagine the Civic Plaza?
Yes. Yes, we do agree with this conclusion from the District Bridges report.
So there will be, and can you qualify that to the extent, what specific, and again, I know that I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I want this to feel like you guys are, independently releasing some of these findings and not necessarily being, influenced by this conversation or others, but what specific aspects of the plaza would you be unwilling to change or, offer any recommendations to change?
So, the team has been focused on incorporating the feedback from our series of engagement activities. And now we are working on creating those design recommendations. I think first, I wanted to point out, so the 2004 public realm framework laid a good foundation for the public realm in the Columbia Heights. So we kind of want to continue some aspects of what it was outlined in that 2004 public realm plan. But the current project, so we are trying to build on this framework and adapting to the recent community changes and, also the organic growth of the activities, things like the vending. But it's not a Civic Plaza issue, but it's a Columbia Heights issue, right? So, and this time we are gonna use a more data-driven approach. And we hope to offer a flexible, like a kit and parts approach in terms of the recommending the design and the physical improvement. So I hope, the team hopes the toolkit will allow for a more like a tailored solution to ensure the public spaces, including the Civic Plaza, to be like vibrant and inclusive, resilient, and it can meet the evolving needs from the community.
To get to the elephant in the room, for a lot of neighbors who may be tuning in, and for me personally, in my capacity, as a commissioner who oversees the Civic Plaza, based on the work that you're doing around the public life study and the vending zone study, and again, I know you don't want to give away too much, but how might the introduction of sidewalk vending at the plaza, which I believe is a possible recommendation, or at least it's being contemplated, how might the introduction of that impact the Civic Plaza? And whether that's positive or negative, just give me some general thoughts on how you view that either helping or hurting the space in some way.
Alicia, do you want to
Yep, I can
share
go.
your insights? Yeah.
Yep, I can answer that. So I think, so there are a couple of things. In the scoping of the project, we have been asked to develop design guidelines for the entire community. And that the scope that we were given from council was not a reimagining of the park, although it's certainly a possibility. And so one of the things I want to just make very clear that in the kit of parts that when we think about our design guidelines, there's like a different scales of improvements. So that's one part of it. Because we're looking at the space as it is now. How can they be improved? What is missing? How are people using the space? And how can we make improvements to make the space more useful based on what we hear back from the public? And that's a deliverable. The second piece is the vending study itself, which is more high level. And it's certainly, relocating vendors to the plaza is on the table. And that would probably require, a full reimagining. But from our perspective, they're separate because we are thinking about vending as it relates to public space. It's kind of belongs a different bucket of recommendations. So there's kind of our more general public space recommendations. And then there's the, if vending is made permanent in this space, this is what would need to happen. And so they kind of work hand in hand together. But because we cannot implement a vending study, we cannot implement the vending, any recommendation, and it really is just a study to think about what the possibilities are. Those are softer recommendations than what will come out of the design guidelines. So I guess to answer your question, there is a possibility that there are recommendations that will come out that will require a full, reimagining of the plaza. And our job is to think about the plaza in its new reality since COVID, since demographics have changed, since the onset of vendors along the street, is reimagining how those can fit into space in a way that is inclusive and resilient and welcoming for all. And then we've also been asked to think about vending and how that can fit in. Some of the recommendations that come out of that will in order for vendings to be safe and people can wash their hands well and all these different things, that might require some really significant infrastructural changes. We are not recommending those. The reason why these are separate deliverables is because they have separate implementers. And it's important for us that vending is we're still grappling with it as a district government, and how we support it, where we allow it, what the parameters are around that as it relates to public space. And so this vending study is really just more information for our government partners who are managing those processes. But it's important for it to not hold up the overall improvements of public space, which, as Lee mentioned, isn't just the plaza, but the full scope of public space in both Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant.
Thank you so much for that very detailed response. I really appreciate that. And Ms. Wilson, when it comes to space activation, you talked a little bit about more, again, kind of contemplating just, post-pandemic changes and just the new reality of the, Civic Plaza and just the needs and wants and desires of the community. There seems to be two distinct cohorts, right, of people who like the liveliness and who like all of what comes with the space activation, and then others who say, well, we want some of the more traditional intended, uses to kind of lounge and do those things. So would you agree it's important to find an appropriate balance of some of those noisier special event, programming opportunities with other times where the plaza should be available just for passive uses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to come and, have a managed, dining experience from the number of small businesses we have, read and lounge and kind of those other quote unquote normal park space uses. Is that something that is, again, going to be contemplated in some of the possible outcomes for the study? And how can we work to help educate those that may be coming to, DPR and others for permitting to figure out a healthy balance to make sure that, the community need is really being served?
Yeah, so absolutely, we because a proper civic space should balance all of those things, and so we are looking to accommodate that. And I guess when thinking about the plaza, there are a few things that we absolutely need plazas to do. One is to accommodate. I think probably the most pervasive thing is to accommodate that passive recreation. For a plaza like this in a cultural melting pot, certainly to facilitate actual events. Those are two things that we needed to do. And there are a number of examples of plazas and public spaces that have more permanent vending spaces, which again, that's on the table, that's an option. And so we believe that in the infrastructure in Columbia Heights, there is room for a variety, the full gamut of activities. And so I think for us, it comes down to programming kind of the where and how becomes very important. And that's what we're teasing out now.
Got it. Mr. Watts, if you are still with us, going back a little bit to some of the traditional kind of park stewardship and management efforts that would fall on the auspices of a park partner, are you tracking any of those best practices to understand, kind of maybe where other park partners are being rather successful and kind of maybe where things may break down in other parks and spaces across the district? I want to make sure that, again, as we come out of this conversation, we, eventually get the study, that we have a framework and a successful pathway forward. So I want to make sure that if you guys feel like the park partner, should be working along a certain, line of whatever, we have that. Are you tracking any of those best practices?
So I am, and I'm definitely, I think I've been managing my portfolio for about a year now, and so we're definitely built the infrastructure. We're tracking it. I mean, we have systems in place to do that. I think that this is a unique space. This is not our traditional space, right? And I think that and so when you have something unique, it's the cookie cutter approach is obviously is not working. And so I'm thinking, so I will take it back to my team and sort of look at some ways that we can, enhance what we're doing and take some of my ideas about how we do that. But I think that again, as I reiterated, I'm committed to one, making sure that we're at the table, that we're supporting efforts to make it a livable space. I'm also committed to seeking and seeing we can re-engage, getting a friends group or something, alike that will partner with us and to maintain that space. I think that we're, hearing from Office of Planning around the lack of interest in the business community to engage is a very serious thing. And I think all of, if you have a partnership established, it's an easier way to engage, the other partners to come as a strategy. And so maybe establishing a partnership so that they don't assume that they're, assuming all the risk and all the responsibilities is a way to sort of, begin to establish opportunities for ownership and turning the tide around their engagement because that's significant. I mean, so when you must have community, you must have government, and you must have the private sector really working together, particular space that's impacting all those factors. And when you don't have it, it can definitely hinder the change that you're trying to do. So I'm here to be part of that discussion and part of the work, so we can do something about it.
Definitely. I appreciate that. And are there any grant or financial opportunities that exist that could support some of this short-term and long-term stewardship that we're talking about to potentially go to a partner organization? Because I think any group that decides to, take on this, and again, there is a group that is willing to, step back in and, do that work. Is there a way to kind of provide some seed funding to just get them active and allow them to kind of, get their hands back on the work of the plaza?
So what I am not responsible for that area, but the agency does have a grant making arm and just processes for groups to apply for funding to support our efforts. And I'm sure that providing that they meet whatever qualifications are like, we can figure something out. Of course, I can't make that commitment, but we do have the ability, providing within whatever the legal guidelines we have to provide money.
Got it. And we are in the home stretch here, so I want to do a lightning round and kind of hone in on some final issues. Another prevalent issue at the Civic Plaza that impacts the general use and enjoyment of that space is the unpermitted amplified sound activities that take place there and across the public realm. This has dramatically increased in frequency in recent years, particularly after the pandemic. And it's mostly street preaching that occurs almost daily by different groups, usually spring, summer, sometimes in the fall. MPD oftentimes when called, and I will reference a specific incident where I believe MPD was called out by 6 different individuals. And when they got there, they'll often say, well, there's little we can do, council or the courts have, tied our hands. DLCP, which is the primary enforcement agency, is almost always unavailable or, unwilling to come out to respond to calls for enforcement. So, Mr. Watts, would you agree that this is a clear violation of the agency's permitting guidelines for activity on that space. And beyond the fact that this is, generally considered to be First Amendment activity, which should be and is protected speech, does the agency not have an obligation to ensure amplified sound is regulated in that space, no matter the speech or activity?
This is our first time hearing the commission. I definitely have to have more information before I give an opinion. But I'm willing to look at it and have the agency provide a response.
Well, I do want to note that there is legislation pending at council, the Amplified Sound Mitigation Act of 2024 that was sponsored by Chairman Mendelson, that would kind of streamline some gaps in enforcement. I do not know if DPR has an official stance on that legislation, but I would welcome Director Freeman's follow-up from you on that. Again, this is the DPR. This is a DPR asset. There are clear permitting guidelines. And I know, public space permitting is a very important feature of managing, these kinds of spaces. So I would really like to get the agency on record, providing some kind of thought on what their role should be with that. Ms. Wilson, I want to bring OP back into that particular conversation because the public space program of the Office of Planning is a member of the Public Space Committee that is led by the District Department of Transportation, or DDOT. What's OP's position on permitting, general activity in public space? And I don't want to get anybody in trouble about trying to, opine on First Amendment activity, which is constitutionally protected. But we all agree unpermitted activity is unpermitted activity, right? And any use of amplified sound without a permit is technically illegal. So can you talk about how OP would approach this, or what its position is on it?
We don't have one. We would support our partner agencies in their enforcement of the policies that already exist.
Okay, so the agency's Public Space Activation and Stewardship Guide cites DDOT's Public Realm Design Manual, which says the way public space is used and designed impacts residents, workers, and visitors. Consistent application and enforcement of public space policies and regulations give our city a distinct character defined by our open spaces and results in a greener, more walkable city. With that in mind, again, pointing to the fact that we're saying by having consistent application of public space laws and regs, we're going to have better public space. Would you not say that OP should be opining on ways to make sure that public enjoyment can happen in public space in light of these rules and regulations that should be enforced?
Yeah, I mean, our position would be that those regulations should be enforced as they're written. We would not create new policy on top of that because it already exists. And enforcement, we don't enforce. And so,
Right.
yeah, so we support that, the existing policy that exists and do agree that they should be enforced. But we wouldn't have
Okay.
a position different than that. And we wouldn't in our public life study, we will, because part of our work is the observation of how space is used. And so certainly we would acknowledge, and we've heard that that is a deterrent for how public space is used. So we would definitely acknowledge that because we've heard that from communities. And our perspective is that if those policies are not being enforced and they're impacting public spaces, they should be.
Thank you for saying that. And I do want to go back to what Mr. An said at the outset about public space influencing and contributing to kind of the commercial life of the neighborhood. I will say personally, I have had a business in my district come to me several times. In one instance, there was, street preaching happening. They had to unfortunately open their windows because their, AC unit was out, and they had 3 tables get up and leave. So they had business walk out the door because of something that technically could be regulated. So I do want to make sure that it's as we're talking about these very specific goals and aims of public space and what that means for the life of our community, that we're making sure that there is, as your public space guide says, consistent application of those public space, rules and regulations. Mr. Stokes, I don't know if this is for you or DPR. Given the host of challenges that we're seeing at the plaza and understanding the general needs to kind of just track things, catalog, what's going on, would it be useful to install kind of video monitoring technology, anything for surveillance, that would help us manage this space better? I do know there are some bids who do some of this. I was talking, I believe, with Tim Mayer from the Office of Planning, who was highlighting, I believe it's DuPont and maybe Golden Triangle that do something like this. So obviously this would be a significant investment that needs to happen, maybe not by the government, or maybe the government should take a role in this. Again, I keep coming back to the fact that, as OP has described this, it's a regional center. So there's going to need to be a hybrid model of the district playing a larger role than it might traditionally play in some other public spaces. So would that be something that DGS would be facilitating, if that came about? And I guess for DPR, do you have surveillance monitoring at other parks or public spaces? I don't know if you want to answer that, if you want to defer to DPR.
I can check on, I would imagine, it seems like everywhere in the world is now monitored or cameraed or taped or something. So I don't know what already exists there. I'm almost positive there's got to be something that's monitoring.
So there are some
plaza.
there are some MPD cameras, and again, that would be a little different, right? Because I believe that MPD has transitioned to kind of a real-time monitoring posture, but I don't know if that necessarily means they're always reviewing footage or, whatever the case may be. But it seems like the cameras that are there, which are mostly along 14th and Irving and maybe a couple of blocks over from Park Road, I think they're only reviewing that footage when there's a major crime incident. They're not going back to look at, oh, well, what was happening this week? Maybe we got a lot of, calls about, maintenance issues or things. So let's just generally observe what was happening at that point in time. I don't think that's happening with the existing surveillance options in the area. So that's what I'm getting at about, could there be something that is continually monitoring the area and then that is actually being reviewed by, Mr. Link? He's connecting maybe with, Mr. Watts, and they're kind of understanding what's transpiring in those spaces to kind of target the agency's response in some way.
I'm not familiar with that. The cameras that I think that DGS has, and even I think working with our sister agency at DPR, all those cameras that we have on facilities, or they're used for if some type of criminal activity were to take place or something were to happen, then you have that on tape and you can go back and review it. I don't know if any other use of cameras in our facilities. I can go back and check. We can definitely go back and check. But everything I know, as far as my knowledge, is that any camera on a facility that DGS takes a look at or that the agency monitors, we're normally there to review in case something criminal happens.
Got it.
Or incident of safety or something and the like. I don't know any standalone in where there's no person man in open space like that is in place, but I'm willing to go back to examine that. Again, I do want to reiterate that we don't have a resource station there. And normally when we have cameras and things like that, even in our part, there's some type of building or something that that we have a staff person there to do that. But I'm willing to go back and look at that and have a discussion about it.
I appreciate that. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to address my questions. I'm gonna look to both my colleagues here to ask if they have any final questions or thoughts they wanted to share.
John Henderson. I just would thank everyone for providing some really useful information about how the space is currently managed. I would just reiterate that based upon my knowledge of how public plazas are managed successfully in other cities, they do require that elevated level of maintenance, and whether we can align the existing resources and maybe complement them with resources from volunteers, a park partners group or whatever. There is a park partners group. It's been dormant for a couple of years since before the pandemic, but it can be reactivated. And I think there's a lot of interest in the plaza in Columbia Heights. So I think something can be mobilized. But I do think the business community has to be engaged in a serious way. It can't be done just by volunteers. You have to have people that can command the attention of the mayor's office, that have a lot of clout, who can help steer this to a successful conclusion. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for your time, everyone here in person and virtually. Really appreciate it. I have two quick questions. It's totally separate, so I'll start with my first one. You may have covered this at the beginning, but as you think about all 8 wards across DC, all neighborhoods, are there any similar plazas that you can think of that you kind of would hold to like the maybe the gold standard of how they're currently managed? They have a really good friends of system, or maybe there's a bid or Main Street that's part of it, or one that you think kind of could be an example of what the Civic Plaza could potentially be in the future in terms of management, not necessarily design, but management. Every neighborhood's different. Just as you think about maybe from a DPR perspective or DGS, since you build out, anyone, maybe even OP, if you're familiar with other public spaces. Just want to hear if there's other plazas that come to mind as top notch.
I'm going to say that was answered before you arrived, so I will provide you some updates on
Okay. My that's fine. Appreciate you already answering it. I hope there were good answers. I can't wait to find out what they were. Second question is kind of an ending one. Just as a closing, some thoughts from you all. Like, if you all were to make some recommendations of what the ANC as neighborhood leaders, neighbors themselves, even neighborhood organizations could do, even small ways, could do differently to better maintain and advocate for this central plaza in Columbia Heights, what might that advice or recommendations be?
I am going to say for agencies, it's probably best to provide that in writing so that we have a record. And I will make sure that my colleague actually joins me in some of those conversations that we'll have as follow-ups. But I think specifically for DPR, let's make sure that we get some answers from the agency about some next steps and ways that we can be of best assistance to build out this partnership as we turn the page and look towards, trying to work together in a better way going forward. And I do want to recognize another community member who is a member of the committee. Ms. Phelps, are you available to speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yeah. I'm Priscilla Phelps. I'm a member of Anthony's special committee and a long-term, more than 20-year resident of Columbia Heights. I just would like to say, first of all, thank you very much to all the city officials for your participation in this call. I've learned a tremendous amount listening to you over the last couple of hours. But I wanted to make one comment. We're very much focused on the Civic Plaza, and that's the purpose of the call. And the plaza is sort of the node of the neighborhood. But I think it's important to point out that a lot of the problems that we're mentioning don't occur only at the plaza. They radiate out into the whole neighborhood, whether it's the sanitation, the deterioration of the infrastructure, people's concern about security, just the general kind of quality of life issues in the neighborhood. And I think some people think that the plaza is in some ways the cause of the problems that radiate out from the plaza, but I think we shouldn't think about some of these issues as just being plaza specific. I think if we could solve them at the plaza, it might reverberate into the other areas of the neighborhood. But the same problems exist throughout Columbia Heights that we've been discussing today, with the possible exception of the pigeons, I guess. The pigeons are very concentrated and at home on the plaza. But otherwise, I would just like to ask the government officials who are here attending to think about this as a somewhat broader set of concerns in the neighborhood than just at the plaza. And I'll mention one in particular, which is my pet peeve in the neighborhood, which is the complete neglect of the tree boxes throughout the entire neighborhood. We have no tree box fences, we have no plantings. No one cares for the tree boxes, and it's part of what makes the neighborhood look very deteriorated. So that was otherwise, I think Anthony's brought up some of the other issues that I had, and I think we've covered our main concerns, and want to thank you all very much.
On. So I'm going to, again, thank all of our government witnesses, and this is going to conclude the special committee's public hearing on the challenges and opportunities with the management of the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza. Again, thank you to our government witnesses who testified. The record for today's hearing will close on Thursday, September 19th, 2 weeks from today. Neighbors can submit written testimony for the hearing record to the Special Committee on Public Life at 1a@anc.dc.gov. For the convenience of the viewing public, please note that the commission has officially returned from its summer recess, resumed its normal operational schedule, and will convene for its next regular meeting on Wednesday, September 11th at the Latin American Youth Center at 1419 Columbia Road. This will be a hybrid meeting with the commission meeting in person and online via Zoom. There being no further business before the special committee, the time is now 4:31 p.m. and this public hearing of the Special Committee on Public Life of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1A is now adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.